Politics has always been a huge part of our society. The first decade of the 2000s can be seen as a super significant part of political history. So much happened in the beginning of this century, such as the 9/11 attacks and the stock market crash of 2008. The amount of change and good that happened during the 2000s for politics was a lot. Some good things that happened in the 2000s decade was the creation of new policies and trends, such as the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare. From all that happened in this decade, it is easy to say that politics was significant in the 2000 to 2010 decade because of the 9/11 attacks, the domestic trends, leaders, and policies, and the environmental issues. Politics was significant in the 2000s decade because of the 9/11 attacks and the terrorist concerns. To start off, it was a nice September morning in New York City. Everything seemed to be nice and normal. That is until American Airlines Flight 11 crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. This was thought to have been an accident until another flight struck the South Tower. From that moment, everyone knew it was an attack. These were not the only planes to attack either. There were two other ones. One of them flew into the Pentagon, killing 189 people, and the other plane was flown into the ground outside the Capitol after the passengers of the plane overtook the terrorist and flew it into the ground, saving hundreds of lives. Once the US found out who was behind the attacks, Congress declared war on terrorism, which was mainly Al-Qaeda. This declaration of war led to the war in Iraq and the killing of hundreds. The 9/11 attacks are one of the two attacks on US soil. Pearl Harbor is the only other attack on US soil. The 9/11 attacks did lead to a lot of events as well. These events include the death of Osama bin Laden, the leader behind the 9/11 attacks, and an improvement of home security in the US. Overall, the 9/11 attacks were significant to politics because it led to a war, death of thousands, and improvements to US security. Politics in the 2000s decade was significant because of the domestic trends, leaders, and policies that happened during this time. There were two new leaders during this era, which included Barack Obama and George W. Bush. Bush signed new acts that helped the U.S., such as the No Child Left Behind Act and the Economic Stimulus Act. Bush also led the U.S. into the Iraq War. Barack Obama also became president during this time and did multiple things to improve the country. One thing Obama did was that he signed the Affordable Care Act of 2010, which expanded the Medicaid coverage to millions of low-income Americans and made health care available to almost everyone. Obama also was the leader behind the mission to kill Osama bin Laden. Overall, both of these men did a lot as leaders of the U.S. From these leaders, they created new policies such as the Affordable Care Act, the USA Patriot Act, and the Economic Stimulus Act, and the No Child Left Behind Act. The USA Patriot Act lowered barriers that prevented law enforcement from sharing information about terrorism. This made it easier for law enforcement to monitor activities of potential terrorism. The Economic Stimulus Act lowered the top personal income tax rate from 39.6% to 33% and started the country on a path toward eventual elimination of the estate tax, a tax on assets held by an individual at the time of death. Finally, the No Child Left Behind Act required mandatory yearly testings of students in grades 3 through 8 to make schools accountable for the students' knowledge in subjects. All of these policies greatly helped the U.S. and its citizens. Now, the domestic trends that occurred during this time period are the Iraq War, 9/11, and the stock market crash. To briefly explain, the Iraq War was a war on terrorism, but really, the terrorists were just Al-Qaeda. 9/11 were terrorist attacks against the U.S., which were explained previously. Finally, the stock market crash of 2008 was a period of time when the market crashed almost as bad as the Great Depression market crash. The only main difference is that in 2008, it greatly affected the real estate. To conclude, politics in the 2000s was significant because of it leading to a lot of new leaders and policies, including the Affordable Care Act and the No Child Left Behind Act, all that were mentioned before. Politics in the 2000s decade was significant because of the environmental issues. The 2000s decade was the result of the ignorance of the environmental problems of the past. It led to this decade into having to live with these problems and have to try to fix these problems. One of the environmental problems was the coal problem. The coal problem is a result of bad methods of disposing toxic coal waste. This leads to pollution. Mountaintop mining is also a problem because it ruins the environment and is causing outrages from people living near these coal mines in the mountains. Another environmental problem is overpopulation. This is caused by reproduction. People are having more children and people are living much longer due to the better medical advances. This is a problem because it can cause major shortages of food, water, energy, and can increase the chance of infectious diseases. The last problem to be discussed is global warming. Everyone knows about global warming, but no one seems to want to fix it. They think it'll just go away, but it won't. Global warming causes the climate to change all around the world, including the polar ice caps. These ice caps have been melting, which causes ocean levels to rise. At the rate it is going, the ocean will rise to be over some buildings by the shores. In conclusion, the first decade of the 2000s has seen its good moments and its bad moments. But from every problem that occurs, we become smarter and find more ways to be better. This decade has seen a lot, such as 9/11, another stock market crash, new leaders and policies, and a lot of environmental problems. But from all this, we learn as a country on how to handle new situations. This is why the 2000s decade was significant.